Winterfell was cold, but Sansa's heart was colder. Jon Snow had returned from the south, full of honor and full of hope. He told her Daenerys was the queen who would save the realm. He said she had dragons, armies, and a pure heart. He asked Sansa to trust him, but Sansa couldn't, not because she hated Daenerys, but because she didn't believe in queens who burned cities and smiled while doing it. She remembered what Cersei had done. She remembered what Ramsay had done. And to her, Daenerys was no different. A pretty face with fire behind it. She didn't trust people like that. Not anymore. Jon, as always, didn't listen. You have to see her heart, Sansa. She wants peace. Sansa had laughed. So did Robb, and they took his head. That night, Sansa couldn't sleep. The castle was quiet, the wind howling against the stone walls. She stood by the window, thinking about the north, about the past, and about her family. And then came the raven. She opened the letter with shaking hands. The seal was broken. The ink was old, faded, but the words were clear. I am alive. I'm coming. Robb. She dropped the letter. No. This can't be. But it was. Robb Stark, the young wolf, her brother, the one she thought long dead, was alive, hidden, waiting, saved by loyal men who had never stopped believing in the king in the north. Men who had taken him from the Red Wedding before the worst of it. The letter told her everything. How Robb had been wounded, captured, then freed. How he had waited, healed, and gathered strength in the shadows. How he had watched Jon bend the knee to Daenerys and knew the North would fall again if he stayed silent. He asked her one question. Will you fight beside me, or let the dragon burn us all? Sansa didn't answer right away. Her mind was torn. Jon was her brother too, though not by blood, as she had now learned. He was honest, brave, loyal, but also blind to the madness of the Targaryen queen. Blind to the way she looked at people, not as equals, but as tools or enemies. Sansa didn't sleep that night. The next day she stood at the table with Jon, Arya, and Tyrion. They spoke of alliances, of Daenerys, of what was to come. And Sansa played her role well. She smiled when needed, nodded when asked. She kept her betrayal quiet, deep in her bones, hidden even from Arya. But later that evening she went to the Godswood, alone. The wind whispered through the trees. She knelt before the heart tree and whispered back, I'm sorry, Jon. She wrote a letter in secret, gave it to a raven, sent it north to the place Robb said he would be. That was the moment Winterfell chose a different path, not of loyalty, but of vengeance, of blood, of wolves. The days that followed felt like a quiet war inside Sansa's chest. Jon rode out with Daenerys to rally the southern lords, leaving Winterfell in Arya's watch. But Arya didn't care for ruling. She was a shadow, a blade, not a mind. Sansa took back the seat of control, and no one questioned her. She was the Lady of Winterfell, and people trusted her. That trust, she realized, was her weapon now. Every night she stared at the flames in her chamber, not for warmth, but for visions. She remembered how Melisandre had once looked into the fire for truth. Sansa had never believed in fire gods or red witches, but now she wanted answers from anything, anyone. She whispered, Show me my brother. The fire danced, cracked. Nothing came, but a day later he arrived, not in her dreams, in flesh, Robb Stark, alive. His arrival wasn't grand. No banners, no trumpets, just a hooded man on a tired horse, entering through the secret northern gate in the middle of the night. She waited at the gate herself, her red hair blowing in the cold wind. When she saw him, she didn't breathe. He pulled back his hood, and there he was, older, worn, scar across his jaw, but the same eyes, the same sad smile. Sansa, he said, almost like he didn't believe it. She ran to him, hugged him like a ghost might disappear if you let go too soon. You died, she whispered, her voice shaking. They told me you died. I almost did, Robb said. But I've been waiting, watching, gathering, and now I need you. They didn't talk in the courtyard. Too risky. She led him to the crypts beneath Winterfell, the old, cold tombs of the Stark kings. Only there among the dead did they speak freely. Robb told her everything. The Freys had tried to kill him at the Red Wedding. They had stabbed him, yes, But one of his bannermen, a silent man named Wylis, had dragged him out, bleeding, and faked his death. The real horror had happened without him. Robb had been hidden by Loyal Mountain. Clans, healed, hidden, and bitter, he had watched. The Boltons take Winterfell, watched Jon take it back, watched Jon bend the knee to a Targaryen queen, and now he had returned, not for a crown, but for justice. For the North, she'll burn as Sansa, Robb said in the darkness of the tombs. You've seen it in her eyes. Fire is in her blood, just like her father, Sansa nodded. She's already started. Jon won't see it. He's blind. Then we must open his eyes, or close hers. It was the first time she heard Robb speak like that, cold, final. He wasn't the boy king anymore. He was something else. A man who'd come back from the dead, and had nothing left to fear. Sansa felt something, change in her heart, that night she wasn't just betraying Jon, she was choosing Robb and Winterfell, and herself. The plan was slow, careful. She couldn't send ravens, too dangerous. Messages could be read, so she sent trusted men. Carried word by foot, not wing. Northmen who remembered the young wolf, who would rise if they saw his face, and they did, from the flint cliffs to the last hearth. The word spread in whispers, the king in the north lives. Meanwhile, Jon and Daenerys pushed south, gathering more allies. Daenerys smiled at Jon in public, kissed him before their men, but her eyes were colder now. Sansa could see it in the letters Jon sent home, shorter, less warm. Sansa knew that fire was building. Somewhere down the road, someone was going to burn, and she would not let it be Winterfell. Arya grew suspicious. She watched Sansa too closely, followed her, listened behind doors. One evening, Sansa caught her in the library, staring at an old map Robb had marked. "You're hiding something," Arya said. Sansa closed the book slowly. "You're spying. I'm protecting. Then trust me. I don't trust anyone who keeps secrets from family." Sansa looked her in the eye, cold as snow. "Neither do I." That night she sent Arya away, on a mission south, to keep watch over Daenerys. A lie, but Arya took the bait. She rode fast. Didn't even say goodbye. That gave Sansa time, and Robb an open path. A moon later, Robb gathered his forces in the woods near Winterfell. No banners, no drums, only men with quiet steps and sharp blades. Jon was returning. Daenerys was coming with him, and Sansa stood in Winterfell, wearing her mother's cloak, her face pale as death. As the storm began to rise on the horizon, she had chosen her side, and there was no turning back. Snow was falling again. Soft at first, like the gods were trying to cover the north in silence. Sansa stood at the top of the battlements, her eyes on the long, dark road that led to Winterfell's gates. Her breath turned to mist in the freezing air, but she didn't shiver. Not anymore. She had become the kind of woman who kept her warmth buried deep, locked behind secrets, lies, and strategy. Today, Jon was coming home, and he was bringing a dragon with him. Behind him would ride Daenerys Stormborn, mother of dragons, breaker of chains, and soon, if Sansa allowed it, the Queen of Ashes. But not if Robb Stark had anything to say about it. Winterfell buzzed with nervous energy. Servants polished the great hall, baked fresh bread, hung the Stark banners with care. It was supposed to be a homecoming, a celebration of unity. But Sansa had already told the cooks not to waste their best wine. This was no feast, it was a funeral in disguise. Down below, in the shadow of the godswood, Robb waited in secret. He had dyed his hair darker, wore no crown, and dressed like any common northern rider. Only a few trusted men had seen him. They bowed low and wept when they did, not out of joy but fear. They knew what this meant. If Jon and Daenerys ruled together, the north would burn. The Dragon Queen had fire in her blood and revenge in her eyes. And Jon, foolishly loyal, would let her do as she pleased. Sansa walked the halls like a queen now. She had dismissed Tyrion from her council weeks ago, politely, but with cold finality. He had grown too soft, too unsure. The imp no longer had claws. He only whispered riddles and drank wine. Sansa didn't need riddles anymore. She needed results. The horns blew at sunset. A long, Low sound, a signal that travelers approached from the south. Sansa closed her eyes for a moment. Let the cold wind hit her face. This was it. The moment everything would shift. When she opened her eyes, she was steel. She walked down the stairs slowly, her black cloak sweeping behind her, her footsteps calm and echoing. Outside the gates, Jon Snow arrived, hood down, sword on his hip and exhaustion on his face. Behind him, Daenerys rode a pale white horse, regal as ever. One of her dragons circled high above, a black blur against the grey sky. They were met with cheers at first. Small folk clapped. Soldiers bowed. But it was the kind of applause born out of duty, not joy. Winterfell's walls were tall and strong, but the air was colder than usual, suspicious. Sansa greeted Jon first. She hugged him. Briefly, "You look tired," she said, forcing a smile. "And you look like a queen," Jon replied, trying to mean it. His eyes flicked up to the towers, to the quiet guards, to the missing banners. "Where's Arya?" "South. Watching our enemies?" Daenerys stepped forward. "Sansa," she said, her tone sweet but sharp. "I hear Winterfell has grown even colder since I left." "I only reflect the weather," Sansa replied calmly. "The North does not forget," Jon gave her a warning glance. "We're all on the same side." But Sansa was already turning, leading them inside. "Let's not keep the hall waiting." Inside the great hall, the fire was roaring, but the warmth didn't spread. The northern lords sat stiffly, watching the queen with cautious eyes. Jon stood beside her, trying to bridge a gap that was growing wider by the second. Daenerys raised a cup. "I come not to conquer, but to unite," she said. "The threat is gone. The war is over. Now is the time for peace." There was a pause. Then a voice rose from the corner. "Peace comes after truth." Everyone turned. A man stepped forward from the shadows, his face half covered by a cloak. Daenerys narrowed her eyes. Jon froze. Sansa stood without flinching. The man pulled back his hood. Gasps filled the hall. It was Robb Stark. Alive. Older, yes. Scarred, yes. But unmistakably Robb. Jon stood up so fast he knocked over his chair. "Robb, is this—" "It's me, brother," Robb said, calm. "And I've come to stop you from burning our home." Daenerys looked at Jon, confused. "What is this madness?" But Jon was staring at Sansa. "You knew. You hid this from me." "I had to," Sansa said, her voice quiet but firm. "You wouldn't have listened." The room broke into shouts. Some lords stood for Robb, some for Jon. Daenerys looked furious, eyes wild. "You plot treason in the house of your ancestors?" She snapped. "You are no queen of the North," Robb said, stepping forward. "You were never welcome here." Jon bent the knee, but the North never did. Jon turned to Sansa. "You betrayed me." Sansa looked at him, tears stinging her eyes, but her voice was steady. "No, Jon, I saved you. You gave your heart to fire. I gave mine to the North." The hall exploded into chaos, and above Winterfell, the dragon roared. The dragon's roar echoed above Winterfell like thunder trapped in a cage. Inside the great hall, silence followed, thick, heavy, the kind of silence that comes before the world rips itself apart. Jon didn't move. He stood in the middle of the room, between two worlds. Behind him, Daenerys, fire in her blood. In front of him, Robb and Sansa, ice in their veins. Robb's eyes never left Jon's. He didn't raise a sword. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. A ghost returned, a king who refused to die, and a brother who had been wronged by time, fate, and family. Jon finally found his voice, but it cracked like old wood. "You should be dead." Robb's face didn't change. "I should be, but I'm not. And now I'm here to stop a second Targaryen from burning our people." Daenerys took a step forward, her voice sharp and cold. "Is that what this is? Some northern trick? A puppet king dragged out of the dirt to scare children?" The insult didn't even shake Robb. He stared straight at her. "I'm no puppet. I was crowned by the North before you ever set foot here, and you lost," she snapped. "No," Sansa said softly, stepping beside her brother. "He was betrayed. By the South. By wolves who wore lion skins. And now we've learned the North bows to no one." Jon looked at her, heart breaking with every breath. "You lied to me, Sansa." "I protected you," she said, eyes glassy but voice strong. From the fire you couldn't see. Daenerys stepped between them now, fury in her bones. I crossed deserts, burned slavers, freed nations, and now I'm to be judged by ghosts and cowards in fur cloaks. Her voice rose, every word sharper than the last. I fought the Night King beside you, Jon. I lost a dragon for you. I lost Jorah, Missandei. I stood against Cersei while you... And then you burned a city full of children, Robb interrupted. Calm, ice cold. His words dropped like stones. Daenerys went silent. Her eyes narrowed. That was the truth no one dared to say out loud. But Robb Stark didn't play court games. He had died once. He didn't fear death again. You burned King's Landing, he said again, slower this time. And you'd do it again if we disobeyed you. I did what had to be done, she whispered, almost to herself. And that's why you'll never rule the North, Sansa replied. Outside, the dragon screeched once more, circling lower. Jon stepped forward, raising his hands between them. Enough. All of you. His voice cracked through the tension like a hammer. I came here to bring peace, not to watch my family tear itself apart, not to see the North break again over another crown. His eyes moved between them all. Daenerys, Sansa. Robb, you're my queen, he said to Daenerys, then looked at Robb. And you're my brother, and finally to Sansa. And you're my home. He turned to the hall. Do you all want another war? More death? Haven't we bled enough? Robb's face was unreadable. You're the one who brought her here, Jon. You opened the door to fire. I thought she was different. She's not. Daenerys spoke now, but her voice was low, dangerous. So what do you want, Jon Snow? To choose between me and them? Everyone froze. The question hung in the air like a sword. Jon looked down. His silence was his answer. Daenerys' face went white, then red. Fury, heartbreak, betrayal, it all passed through her like a storm in seconds. You chose the North, she whispered. After everything. She turned to the guards. Arrest Robb Stark, arrest Sansa Stark, and bring me their heads. The room exploded. Steel was drawn. Northern soldiers grabbed hilts, but so did Unsullied. Chaos. Robb ducked behind the long table, pulled a blade from a fallen man's sheath. Sansa backed toward the corner, her eyes wide but calm. She had seen this moment coming, and Jon did nothing. He stood frozen, watching the queen he had knelt to give the order to kill his family. Grey Worm moved first, fast, deadly. He lunged toward Robb, spear forward, but before it could strike, an arrow hit him in the shoulder. He spun around and found a second arrow in his thigh. The hall turned. Standing on the upper walkway, cloaked in shadows, was Arya Stark. She had returned. You didn't think I'd leave my family alone with the dragon, did you? She said, voice sharp. Daenerys turned furious, but Arya was already moving. She leapt from the balcony like a shadow falling from the sky, blades in both hands, cutting down two Unsullied before her feet even touched the ground. Northern soldiers poured into the room from the side doors. Robb's loyalists, hidden, waiting. Winterfell was under siege from itself, and in the middle of it Jon Snow watched the world fall apart. Again. This time, he didn't raise Longclaw. He walked slowly through the madness, to Sansa, to Robb, to Arya, swords clashing around him, fire crackling in the distance, screams rising, and still he said nothing until Daenerys' dragon landed on the wall above, fire dripping from its mouth. The dragon's wings shook the stone of Winterfell as it landed above the great hall. Its body was a mountain of black scales, its eyes glowing like coals pulled straight from a dying fire. Smoke hissed between its teeth. Fire danced in its throat. People screamed. Soldiers stumbled back. Even the bravest knights paused at the sight of death with wings. Above them all, Daenerys stood like a statue carved in rage. Dracarys, she whispered. But the dragon didn't move. It stared. Down below, Jon Snow had stepped forward, standing in the middle of the hall, sword sheathed. Hands raised, his face half in shadow. No, he said, loud enough for even the walls to hear. You won't burn my home, the dragon growled, confused. Daenerys looked down at him like she didn't recognize him anymore. Her voice cracked. You kneel for me one day and stand against me the next? Jon's eyes didn't leave hers. "I kneeled for peace. You came with fire." A scream tore through the crowd as Arya drove a dagger into another Unsullied's leg, flipping behind him before he could strike. Robb and his loyalists were holding the far side of the room, forcing Daenerys' soldiers into retreat. The northern bannermen were joining in now, some shocked, some furious, all of them choosing sides. But above it all, the dragon loomed. Sansa ran to Jon, grabbing his arm. "She'll burn us all. You have to stop her." Jon stared at the beast he once admired. "If I do this, there's no going back." "There was never a way back," Sansa whispered. "Only forward. Only fire or frost." Robb reached them, blood on his cloak. "She's lost control. Even the dragon hesitates. But that won't last." Jon looked at Arya, who was now crouched behind a pillar, eyes scanning like a predator. "She'll come for you next," Robb warned. "You know that." And then it happened. A blast of heat exploded above them, not fire, but the dragon's warning. A shot of flame scorched the side of the wall, shattering stone, sending rubble crashing down where moments ago Arya had stood. Daenerys was losing patience. She climbed the stairs to the balcony and stood beside her dragon. "Last chance," she shouted. Her voice wasn't human anymore. It echoed, wild and vengeful. "Bow to me, or burn." The room paused. Soldiers froze. Even the dragon looked down at Jon, and Jon looked up at the woman he had once loved. There was sorrow in his eyes. But no more doubt. He stepped into the open, and he said only one word. "No." Time seemed to stop. Daenerys's face twisted into heartbreak and rage. She raised her hand. The dragon inhaled, but then a second voice rang out. "Wait." Everyone turned. Tyrion Lannister stood at the entrance to the hall, flanked by 2 archers from House Mormont, his hand bloody. Limping, "You burn this hall," he said loudly, "and you burn what little honor you have left." Daenerys turned to him, furious. "You're no longer my hand, and you're no longer a queen," he replied, throwing his brooch to the floor. It clinked on the stone and spun like the last breath of an old crown. "Kill them!" Daenerys shouted. The dragon opened its mouth, fire swirling inside, and that's when Arya struck. She had climbed the beams of the hall, leapt onto the dragon's back from above, and drove a dagger deep behind its ear, the same way she had killed the Night King, a weak spot, a quiet place in the skull. The dragon screamed in pain, bucking, swinging its massive head. Fire spilling wildly across the roof, Arya fell, hard, tumbling down the side of the balcony. Jon caught her just before she hit the floor, dragging her behind a shield. The dragon wasn't dead. Not yet, but wounded and furious. It swung wildly, tail crashing through the wall, destroying a pillar, cracking the edge of the roof. Fire sprayed everywhere now. The hall burned from the top down. Banners turned to ash. History crumbled. Daenerys looked down from above, watching her dream die in front of her. "No," she whispered. "No, this is mine." She turned to run, to climb on the dragon, to escape, but Robb was already moving. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time. Daenerys saw him too late. She raised her arm to shout, maybe to strike, but Robb didn't hesitate. He stabbed her through the heart. The hall fell quiet. Daenerys gasped, looked down at the blade in her chest, looked up at the man who'd just ended her story. "You were dead," she choked. "I was," Robb said, pulling the blade out. "And so was peace." She collapsed. Her body slid down the stairs like a shadow falling into dust. The dragon screamed again, loud, broken. It didn't breathe fire this time. It just screamed, and then it flew, bursting through the broken ceiling, wings ripping apart stone and timber. It took to the sky with one last roar, not of vengeance, but grief, and disappeared into the clouds. The war was over, but the silence that followed didn't feel like victory. It felt like something had been lost forever. The smoke didn't rise anymore. It hung, thick, heavy, tired. Winterfell's roof was broken open. Ash rained down slowly, like snow that had lost its purity. The great hall, once the heart of the north, was now a blackened scar. No one spoke. Not yet. Daenerys's body lay on the stairs, her white dress stained red, her golden hair tangled with blood and soot. She looked small now, not like a queen, not like a dragon, just a woman. One who had loved too hard, burned too fast, and lost everything in the name of destiny. Jon stood over her, not crying, not moving, just staring. Arya limped past the ruins. Her hand was cut. Her face was bruised. But her eyes were sharp. She would have burned us all, she said flatly. Jon didn't argue. He couldn't. Sansa stepped beside him, her hair singed at the ends, her dress torn from the chaos. She had fire, she whispered. But you had to let her go, Jon. You knew this would happen. I didn't want this, he muttered, voice hollow. I never wanted any of this. But you were part of it, Robb said, walking down the steps, wiping Daenerys' blood from his sword. We all were. Tyrion entered last. He moved slowly, limping through the ruins like an old man wandering through the grave of a kingdom. He saw Daenerys' body and lowered his head. I believed in her once, he said softly. She promised to break the wheel. But instead, she became it. Silence again, just crackling wood, distant weeping from outside. The North had won. But like all victories in Westeros, it felt more like a funeral than a triumph. Jon turned to Sansa. What now? It wasn't a challenge. It was a question. A plea. Sansa looked at him, really looked at him. This was not the Jon Snow who had saved Winterfell, not the king in the north. This was a man shattered by choices, a man who had followed love into fire and come out burned. You leave, she said gently. Tonight, Jon blinked. Leave? If you stay, the realm will tear itself apart, Robb said. The South will call it murder. The Unsullied will want your head. The Targaryen loyalists will never rest. You'll be the man who killed their queen, not the man who saved anyone. And you? Jon asked, staring at Robb. You murdered her. I killed the threat, Robb said. No shame in his tone. You would have hesitated. Jon didn't deny it. I loved her, he said, and she loved power more than you, Sansa replied. You did what you could. But now you have to go. To where? North of the wall, Arya said, walking to him slowly. Where you belong. Where your mistakes don't follow. Jon looked down. The snow on his boots, the ash in his hair. He looked like a ghost now. Half man, half regret. And what of you? He asked them all. Sansa raised her chin. Winterfell will follow me now. I will lead it as queen in the north, not because I want power, but because no one else will fight for our people like I will. Arya smirked. And I'll go west, to where the maps end. Robb stood still for a moment. Then he turned away from them all. I'll disappear again, he said. My return was a blade, not a crown. Let the people believe I died again. It's better that way, Jon nodded slowly. So we all become ghosts? No, Sansa whispered. We become what the world needs, even if it breaks us. That night, under a moon half covered by smoke, Jon Snow left Winterfell. No fanfare, no banners, just a black cloak, a worn sword, and a heart heavier than any crown. Ghost waited for him at the gate, quiet and loyal as ever. Jon said nothing, just placed a hand on his direwolf's head, and the two walked into the snow together. Toward the war, toward exile. Inside the castle, Sansa stood at the window. She watched him go. Her eyes didn't water. Her hands didn't shake, but her heart. Her heart stayed behind with every step Jon took into the cold. Robb vanished by dawn. No one saw him leave. Some said he rode east. Others said he returned to the shadows from where he came. Sansa didn't ask. Tyrion remained for a while, helping rebuild the hall. Quietly, with no title. No wine, just work and Arya. Arya left on a ship weeks later. No goodbye, no note, only a whisper to one servant. Tell my sister I'm not made for castles. Winterfell rose again, slower, stronger, wiser. Sansa ruled, just as she said she would. Not as a lion's wife or a southern puppet, but as a Stark, the last one who stayed. The last one who sacrificed without dying, and every winter, when the snow grew thick and the wind howled through the trees, she would walk alone through the godswood. She would kneel at the old tree, close her eyes and whisper three names: Jon, Robb, Arya, each one a wound, each one a choice, and the North remained free, not because of banners or dragons, but because a girl who was once broken chose to fight with her mind. Not her sword, and she won.